At the 48th Phyllis Schlafly Eagle Council, we sat down with Dr. Everett Piper, the former president of Oklahoma Wesleyan University. He is also author of Not a Daycare, The Devastating Consequences of Abandoning Truth. Dr. Everett Piper, wonderful to have you on American Thought Leaders.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm honored.
So, today we're talking about a very compelling title to your talk, Freedom and Fences. Why don't you break it down for me?
Well, it's essentially the paradox of discipline and freedom. And we all know that this paradox is true in the way we live our daily lives. For example, if you want to be an athlete, you have to discipline yourself to go to practice, to memorize the plays, to pay attention to the coach, to actually do what he says. And then by his grace, he actually might put you on the field or the court. Right. So you can't be an athlete and just sit in your lazy boy chair with your remote control. In fact, there's a word for that, armchair quarterback. You're fat and sassy, but you really can't do what the guys are doing on the TV that you're sitting there criticizing. So you aren't free to perform unless you discipline yourself accordingly. It's true for a musician also. If you don't discipline yourself within the rules of music, rhyme and rhythm and cadence, and if you don't practice incessantly, you'll never perform a concerto. The only thing you'll hear from your instrument is chaos. Okay. So that's this paradox of discipline and freedom. In fact, G.K. Chesterton had an excellent seminal comment, if you will, where he said, if you get rid of the big laws of God, you don't get liberty, but rather thousands and thousands of little laws that rush in to fill the vacuum. Liberty and law, fences and freedom. If you want to be free, you have to recognize that there are fences that have been historically proven over and over again throughout the course of human history to give you that freedom. And our constitutional republic is actually predicated on those fences. I would argue, as a conservative Christian, that it's the Judeo-Christian definition of those fences that actually give us the freedom we enjoy.
That's absolutely fascinating. So, and I guess from your perspective, some of those fences and corresponding freedoms are under assault?
Oh, absolutely. Now let's take my answer a little bit further in answering that question. Let's look at the Judeo-Christian understanding of law. God gives us 10 laws, the 10 commandments. That's it. He gives us 10 laws and says, live by these. But we refuse to do so. As a people, we refuse to honor 10. And frankly, Jesus narrowed it down to 2. Okay. So we refuse to live by 10 or 2. So what do we see as the result? Thousands upon thousands, reams upon reams of little laws flooding across our nation from Washington, D.C., down to the point where they're telling us how to use the bathroom. Now, what kind of liberty is that? You see the same thing prevailing on our college campuses. Berkeley fancies itself as the birthplace of the free speech movement, but yet Berkeley protests and censors a conservative Jew like Ben Shapiro and says you can't speak on our campus. So I've got news for Berkeley. Free speech was not born in Berkeley, it was born in Bethlehem, because Jesus is the one who told us you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. Not all these little opinions of all these students and professors at Berkeley. It's the paradox of discipline and freedom that we see playing itself out within the boundaries of a Judeo-Christian ethic.
So, are you saying that if people can't be disciplined enough to follow these, let's call them, natural laws or God's laws, 10, 2, perhaps some other small number in other traditions, then you're bound to have big government? Is
Absolutely.
That the argument?
Doesn't the story of history prove
but
that?
Wait, but we're stuck. Then we're stuck with big government, aren't we? Or can we actually somehow get to those 10 or 2?
We have in our past, at least within the United States. It's called Great Awakenings. It's called revival. Europe experienced what? A Reformation. So these reformations, these revivals, these awakenings are times of returning to what? A true north, a standard that allows us to measure the freedoms that we want to enjoy. C.S. Lewis told us that without a measuring rod outside of those things being measured, you can do no measuring. So if you want to have a debate between you and me, because we disagree on whatever issue, If you have the power to judge who's right, I lose. If I have the power to judge who's right and wrong in that debate, you're going to lose. Power and politics can't be the deciding factor over who's right and who's wrong, who's telling the truth and who's not. There has to be an objective standard outside of the two of us to serve as judge. Christ tells us that that's truth. Truth sets us free to engage, because now we can trust an objective referee on that debate. And it gives us intellectual and academic freedom. It's the irony of the ivory tower now. Harvard, Dartmouth, Princeton, and Yale were all founded as Christian institutions. In fact, Harvard's founding mission was to lay Christ at the bottom as the foundation of all. Now, how far has Harvard fallen from that? But here's the question. Does Harvard have more academic freedom today, or did it have more academic freedom and intellectual liberty back then? If you look at the speech codes
question, yeah.
and the call for safe spaces and the trigger warnings and the microaggressions and all of this ideological fascism that's prevailing within the ivory tower, it's clear that they've lost their freedom as the result of stepping away from those big laws that allowed them to enjoy a good, robust argument.
You know, you're obviously a deep Christian believer. That's very clear to anyone that knows you. Is it possible for these types of, let's call them natural laws or rules or God's rules, to basically apply beyond the Christian paradigm?
C.S. Lewis writes in Mere Christianity about the Tao, the T-A-O.
Okay,
the
interesting.
Tao. And he refers to that as the common bond of common sense and natural law that is pervasive across all human beings. He uses the analogy that we prove this to ourselves in the way we interact with one another. Go to any schoolyard and watch children claiming, well, that's not fair. You cheated.
Yeah.
You jumped the gun.
Yeah.
Or you stole my orange. That's one of C.S. Lewis's analogies.
Okay.
Why is that an agreed upon wrong?
Transgression. Yes.
Yeah, it's a transgression that regardless of whether you're Christian or not, you agree that it's wrong to steal my orange. Little children know that. It's wrong to cheat, steal my answers. It's you hit me first. Well, why was it wrong that you hit me first? Anybody who has raised children knows that whether they are Christian or not at any given point in their life, they understand this appeal to some bigger standard that even others in the car or in the community understand. Matthew Perry, who is a journalist, I believe, for one of the London newspapers, is not a Christian. He's an atheist and he's a practicing homosexual. He wrote an article several years ago where he said that as a former resident of Africa, I believe he lived in South Africa as a British citizen at one time, he said, "I am fully convinced as I watch the genocide prevailing across the African continent that the gospel and evangelism is the only solution. It's the only solution that will save Africa, the continent, from the evil and the malign evil of Nike, the machete, and the cell phone. The only thing that will save Africa from itself and from capitalism and violence."
Fascinating.
Materialism and violence would be a better way to put it. Even Matthew Perry recognizes the power of the glue of culture being necessary to hold the people together. And even he, after saying that he disagrees with the gospel and the evangelical message, recognizes that it is that evangel, that good news, that will be the only thing that saves Africa from itself.
So basically, a spiritual grounding, a deep spiritual grounding.
Well, John Adams said, our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people and is wholly inadequate to the government of any other.
Yes, I'm actually very, very aware of that statement. I find powerful words. Agreed. Yeah.
And I believe your mission as a news source is tradition and truth, correct?
Absolutely, truth and tradition.
Consider the quadrilateral in evaluating that. Now, Wesleyans, I'm Wesleyan, embrace the quadrilateral. What is that? You actually can go back to Augustine to find the source. The quadrilateral is a grid through which you sift all debate and all ideas to evaluate their veracity and their truth.
Okay.
Okay? The quadrilateral is four things within that grid: tradition, reason, experience, and scripture. Tradition. Grandma and Grandpa might have known something. The ideas that have stood the test of time are there for a reason. The chronological arrogance of today's youth, the millennials and the Gen Zers, just chucking anything that preceded them as being antiquated and just old ideas, is rather foolish. The old ideas, the traditions, have stood the test of time, and you might want to attend to them. You might want to acknowledge that there's a reason those ideas are still around. Tradition. Reason. You have rational capacities to debate and argue. Do it, recognizing that rationality and logic should prevail at the end of the day. So tradition, Grandma and Grandpa might have known something. Time-tested truths are there for a reason. Reason, rationality, and logic, attend to it. Experience, it's the Dr. Phil question. How's that one working for you? And there are so many ideas that we look at today where we can see the consequences of our negative. And all we have to ask is, well, how's that one working for you?
Right.
We might want to disband that idea and that policy because it's broken and it doesn't work. Richard Weaver, ideas have consequences.
Right.
Good ideas, good consequences; bad ideas, bad consequences. So tradition, reason, experience. What was the fourth one? Scripture.
Right.
You have to have a trump card. Now, if you don't want to call it scripture, let's call it revelation. Is there revelatory truth that every human being can acknowledge? Well, the United States Constitution argues that there are self-evident truths that are endowed to us by our Creator. Those self-evident truths would be akin to revelation. There's a sense of common sense. You stole my orange. You cut in line. You pushed me first. That's a sense of revelation, common sense, and natural law. I would call it scripture.
And is that, and I guess, a gift from the divine?
I would argue yes.
Yes. Okay. Very, very interesting.
The interesting thing is it's a gift to the divine because we're the imago Dei, not the imago dog.
Okay. Explain.
You are the image of God. You're not the image of an animal. You are the imago Dei. That is the blessing and the compliment, the ultimate elevation of the human being. And all of human history is the Christian message of the imago Dei. The Jewish message, the Judeo-Christian message that we are created in the image of God and that we aren't just products of the primordial soup and no different in significance from an amoeba, a dog, a pig, a cat or a cow, as PETA would claim. You actually have moral awareness, cognition, and culpability. And guess what? I'm from Oklahoma. I drove to the airport to get here today. I drove through thousands of acres of cattle ranches. Thousands of cows on the left and the right of the highway as I went to Tulsa, Oklahoma to get on an airplane. And you know what I saw? Not one single cow was arguing with another. They don't do that. They don't do this.
Yes.
They don't write articles. They don't have newscasts. They don't care to debate ideas because they're the imago dog. They're made in the image of animals. They're not the imago Dei, elevated to rational capacities, the quadrilateral of tradition and reason and experience and revelation, of natural law, of common sense, self-evident truths that are endowed by not government, by God, our Creator.
Dr. Everett Piper, fascinating discussion. Good to have you.
Blessings.